a sacrifice seduced for the altar of your vanity. A jealous, hungry God, craving praises of profanity. With bedroom dark and dine, and a deep mouth stained with wine, it drinks its fill. It was your mothers, not your brothers, that agreed to feed you poison. This egregious lack of choice indeed seemed fit to join your voice in, with lies disguised as prizes of reason and wisdom, with briberies of finery to weaken any criticism. Can the fly invade the blossom that devours it? A mouth that lies in wait for a gift of life to shower it.
Alright guys, well, welcome back. Glad to have you. We're on session 109. Now, about 2 months ago in game time, you answered a summons from Labiana Sire, or rather, Labiana specifically answered a summons, and brought the rest of you with her. You braved the war-torn paths to the city of Padua. You endured weather and travel, bandits, made your way to the city, found the cemetery in which he had made his lair, found it besieged. Despite your best efforts, you started a fight and found that Septimus had planned that you would do so, and took advantage of the distraction to escape with the most valuable of his worldly possessions, and had to leave the rest behind. You returned west, stopping near the city of Cuomo, where Gaius is waiting for you, and Septimus continued his journey towards Rome. Flavia crafted a exquisite request to visit the Selassie, and it was delivered by Barak Ball and another messenger servant. The message was successfully received, and they returned to you and said that it had accepted your request. After an indeterminate amount of time, but which your bodies decided had been 5 nights of travel and 5 day sleeps, you finally crested a ridge somewhere in the Alps. You lost no human or canine lives, but left one horse remaining forever among the rocks and shrubs along the mountain paths. And the sounds and sensations of tracking spirits and guardians will be with you for some time as you continue about your lives. Yet you finally crested a ridge and began your way into a valley below, a valley of rocks and running water, and a single point of orange light, a glowing campfire in the distance, next to a ring of standing stones. And that is where we pick up tonight, with the group of you seeing your destination and slowly picking your way across the landscape towards the fire. So, does anybody have anything to talk about before you arrive? Am I even coming through?
Yes, you are.
Okay, it's just
We're
really
hearing.
quiet.
Yeah. Sorry, I can't think of anything that Labiana would want to talk about before going in.
I'm too scared to even talk.
I think Flavia is too embarrassed to talk because every single time she finds herself in a situation where there's a confrontation, she ends up running for the hills. And secretly, she's wondering if the rest of the group considers her sort of to be a coward because she's unable to fight for herself. But she doesn't want to talk about it, she's just thinking it.
So it is with these melancholy thoughts that you approach. You get closer and closer to this campfire. As you approach the stones, you can make out more and more details. Once you are about 30 meters away, you finally make out the stones look odd. They are in a circular pattern, but there are people tied to the stones in contorted positions, all of them universally upside down, feet to the sky and head on towards the ground. There are grimaces of pain and fear etched onto their frozen faces. If the wounds on their bodies had not killed them, surely the temperatures did. Even from this distance away, the flesh appears frozen, and the blood that has run down their bodies onto the rocks forms strange runes in a language or symbolism which is unknown to all of you. You may also see within the stones that there is an altar of some kind. The fire is 10 or 15 meters away from the circle of standing stones, and a single figure stands by it, and it beckons you with open arms. You can smell roasting goat and meat cooking near the flames. And you sense no danger whatsoever.
Avner slowly approaches as she is beckoned. She glances back to the other rest of the coterie, giving them a nod of what's the word? A nod of acknowledgement, a nod of that she believes that this is what they are supposed to do. That she believes that this is the one that they are, if not the Salazi herself, then someone that is under her command.
Yeah, I presume Labiana would understand that she would know that it's what they have to do as well, so Labiana will do the same.
Starters will take a big breath, exhale, and walk behind Labiana, almost hiding behind her.
Well, Flavia will be bringing up the rear then.
Hello, sorry I'm late.
That's alright, we're just approaching a campfire. Just came down from the ridge. So the carts tumble on the uneven ground, slowly, closer and closer. You guys hop off the carts and your horses, and a man stands up. He's dressed in normal woolen clothing, warm cape, thick boots. He has no gloves on, although you can see a pair tied to a belt at his waist. And in the darkness, some figures move, staying out of the light, but they move to go take care of your animals. And he stands and he says, "Greetings." He speaks to you in Latin. "Greetings, sit with warmth in the house of the Selassie. I am her steward, to see to your wants and needs. Sit, relax. Are there any injuries? Do your servants require water or food?" And he looks at you all expectantly.
No one speaks. Flavia would just ask for some water for her dog.
We would greatly appreciate the hospitality others allies and to share in her food, in her sustenance that she can provide us with.
Indeed, it would be appreciated.
Then I shall waste no time. The servants of the Viavod shall see to your animals and your belongings. I have baths prepared for you, and attendants wait to serve. He leads you immediately up and away from the valley. Flavia, you see somebody approach and lay a plate of raw meat and a plate of half-cooked meat cut up into chunks and some water for your dog on which to feast as you guys are led away. It's a short distance walk. Leads you up the valley just a little bit and over a light ridge. There are pools of water that you see and some fires going nearby. People stand near the fires, and you see piles of rocks about the size of a large softball, maybe a little bit bigger, that are piled up in the flames, getting hot. The water, as you see the pool, they're steaming in the nighttime air. And the steward steps forward and he says, "Please, undress. Sit in the water, relax. Allow the Vivo's servants to attend to you. I will return shortly with clothing suitable for your environs." So he walks off, leaving you to the mercies of the attendants. Some of them they're of varying ranges and sexes. There's a couple of older men, an older woman, some teenage boys and girls as well. Nobody of extremely young age. They all seem to be at least 15, 16.
Abner walks over to the shore of the puddle of the lake, of the water, and starts removing her cloak before laying down by the side, not stepping out, not stepping inside, not wishing to cool down the water with her body.
A servant, your pick. If you don't pick one, a older woman will step up to you and begin to wash your body with a woolen rags.
She's not going to be picking one, she's just going to nod in acknowledgement as the servant approaches her. She's going to look over to the others, waiting to see if they will be joining her in washing themselves from the dirt of the road.
I will approach and sit in the bath, remove my clothing and sit in the bath.
As with Albina, if you do not pick one of them will step forward and begin to wash you. The water itself is pleasantly warm, and what you see is it's a big pool for you, and there's a smaller pool, and your feet can feel like an opening, and it's literally carved directly into the rock of the mountain. And what you see is the servant will wash you and then go to the smaller pool and pull out a couple of stones. Walk over to the fire, grab fresh stones that are hot out of the fire with some wood, and walk them over and then drop them in the water. And every time he drops it in, you can hear it go whoosh, and there's a little burst of steam and a couple of bubbles. And that's how they're keeping the water warm.
Clever. And Drotimus will strip down and get in. And just let the attendants do the thing that they have been tasked to do. Doesn't want to, make it any harder for them than it needs to be.
You notice as you are doing this that Each of the servants, while they do not speak, their body language makes it clear that their flesh is available to you in order if you have need to satisfy any urges of carnal or sanguineous nature.
Of course, Labiana will be a bit hesitant initially, on the account of Flavia in this case. But I'm just trying to think if she might look over to Flavia and just say, would you be okay with seeing what is beneath?
At that point, Flavia would just be waiting to see that the dog was taken care of and that he's eating the food and the water that was brought to him. And as soon as she's satisfied that he's feeling calm and more or less at home in his new environment, she would address Labiena and assure her that she may do as she wishes, that she would not at all be objecting to Labiena basically showing herself as she normally looks.
As you wish. And at that point, Labiana will decide to follow the others, disrobe, and get in.
The servant that approaches you is one of the older men, and he does his best to hide it, but your appearance brings him fear. He puts water to your skin, and there's a hesitancy as he tries his best to conceal, but you can tell that he is not used to the prospect of washing such withered flesh, and it is making him very uncomfortable, but he's doing the best he can.
He would be used to this by now.
It is now time for Flavia to do the same as everyone else has, so she disrobes and walks into the pool and just tries to find a seat close to Labiena, and before she gets in, she reaches out to the man that is trying to wash Labiena and just lay a gentle hand on his shoulder, try to make eye contact with him as if to reassure him just with the look on her face that it's all right. That sort of thing. I don't know if I should roll anything for that.
I'm going to have you roll your charisma plus empathy because he might take this as a gesture that he is displeasing you and you are attempting to he might take this as a gesture that he has displeased you in some manner instead of one of comfort.
Hey, I'm sorry, can you repeat that? You said
So
charisma,
I'm going to have
right?
you roll your charisma plus your empathy.
Okay.
Right. As they take their time, wash your bodies, gather up your clothing. Do any of you feed off of them?
I was just about to say, Labiana would take the opportunity to top up at this point.
Androtimus, with some reluctance, will.
Yes. Flavia, you are down 5 blood points from full, so that puts you, I think, at about 2/3, a little bit less. So your inner beast is telling you you need to feed. You should go ahead and take what is being offered to you.
Can she have a pick of whoever is left, or
There's a couple of servants who have not yet been picked.
okay? Are any of them, say, younger people,
Yes, there's
late
a
teenage
teenage
years?
boy and a teenage girl.
Okay, then I think she would pick the teenage boy.
Okay? Right? Alright, so those of you who are feeding, how much blood do you take? Do you stop at a prudent amount, or do you take until you are satisfied?
Exactly 2 here.
I'm gonna take 2, but at the same time, if I can watch Flavia carefully, see that she doesn't mess up.
And are we going to be feeding one blood point from the woman that is washing her?
I think I'm
Yeah,
gonna go with 1, as she's still very careful to drink, not to kill someone.
yeah. Just trying to think if Labiena would be at a stage where she would find it disrespectful to feed any more than 2 from the servants of the Selassie, or whether she'd even care at this point. I think for the time being, she'd just take 2. I think because her etiquette would probably kick in about now.
Right, yeah. 2 seems to be about a prudent amount. Right, so each of you who feed may mark up your sheet. Flavia, you got 3 successes on your roll, so you have successfully shown comfort to the man without it being taken in the wrong way. Finally, after a couple of hours, the steward returns. There is fresh clothing provided to you. They're clean woolen clothes of thick weave. There are some patterns woven into them, patterns of forests and mountains, dark greens, some pale grays, a few browns. They're not silks and cottons of the wealthy of Rome, but these clothes will take a beating in mountain travels and still survive. Your filthy rags and scraps of clothing that you may have worn out of Rome that were not, really meant for this much travel, are whisked away and taken by some of the servants. The steward sits with you, relaxing by the fire with you. You can soak up the warmth. And he says to you, is there any questions, anything I might be able to answer for you before Divyovod is ready to see you?
There are some things that I like to ask, if possible, yes. While we are on our way here, it felt like the distance was not as it usually felt. Like it was, our steps did not took us as far as they should, or sometimes they took us further than what they should. Is this the work of the land or the work of the voivode? The voivode Salazar.
The Voivode has not seen fit to grace me with details of its connection. But I can tell you it serves as a form of protection. The spirits which answer the power of earth and eyesight, clouds, and weather can use their own abilities, their own power to protect the land.
Impressive and beautiful art. It is something that I cannot help but find similarities the only how my bloodline manipulates and controls the shadows.
He just kind of looks at you like he doesn't really know about that. He doesn't really know anything about it. He carves off a hunk of beef and he's slowly gnawing on it as you guys talk. So he's clearly prepared to spend quite a bit of time here waiting for the summons to come.
Out of character, I think on the way in, Labiena would have been somewhat fascinated with those bodies that the coterie passed on the way in. She'd be tempted to see if the servant. Well,
If he
may
knows
or
if he
may
knows
not.
anything about it.
Yeah, what they may. What's like what's being done with them, sort of thing. What?
So you're gonna ask about it?
I believe she'd be curious enough to.
He kind of looks up at the night sky, the very few clouds, doing nothing to dim the brilliance of the stars and the shining moon. And he says, well, they were participants in sacrifices some time ago. They gave their lives and their spirits willingly to empower the magic of the Voivode's rituals. It was something to behold. As the night wore on, and each of them tore at their flesh with their own hands, carving the bloody runes into their skin. I know not if they even knew what they were doing, if their hands were under their own control or not. When they were hung up, it was a mercy that the Voivode tore out their tongues before beginning. They could not truly scream. The power of that night will remain with me forever. I could feel the stones shift under my feet as it responded to the Voivode's will. The carvings on the standing stones appeared as if the blood etched them there. The clouds formed a pool of whirling force and reached from the sky to an apex point near the stones. That night her voice traveled throughout all of her land. It was It was the feel of standing at the center of a storm as lightning cracks all around you and leaves you untouched. Your hair stands up on end. Sadly, my skills are in organization, not in wordsmith. But her divine majesty seemed to me to be untouchable, all powerful. It is to me no wonder that the animals bow down to her as she passes.
It is not the kind of thing that one can describe on witness.
He looks at you and his eyes show that he's impressed at that. It's exactly what he was thinking.
I look at Labiana. Do you want to investigate further?
As Labiana had been nodding her head while the servant was speaking, sort of taking in everything because she finds it somewhat fascinating from a different perspective. She'll turn to Astartes and be like, I'm not going to deny there are certain aspects of it that, pique my interest. However, perhaps and she thinks for a moment. Perhaps there is something about it that I may want to look into.
I look at the servant and I ask him, would it be possible for us to get a closer look at those that sacrifice themselves?
He says, I can take you to look at them from the outside, but I must ask you not to step within the circle of stones. And please do not touch.
And I nod my head.
He leads you
Labiana,
back over the
so-
ridge, assuming you all agree, of course.
Yeah, I think at this point Labiana is just appreciating the opportunity to observe.
He leads you back over the small hump, the short distance away to the standing stones. You see there are 3 of them, and somehow, instead of forming a triangle, you realize they are meant to form a circle. There's like a path of footprints worn over the years carved, which indicates to you it's not meant to be angular triangle, it's meant to be circular. And there's 3 bodies. You can see that each of them were men. They are, of course, nude, and their bodies have been defiled such that the flesh on them is ripped and torn. Now that you've gotten a very close look, you can see that their innards have been left untouched, frozen into hardness. Their blood went up and down the pillar, forming runes of unknown language. Each of you can roll intelligence plus occult.
Yeah, so while we're doing that, the others will be able to see Labiena just sort of actively, just gazing at these bodies, one after the other, and just sort of looking from the flesh wounds to where the blood started seeping out, and looking sort of up and down where the blood travelled along the pillar. Just fascinated at the whole thing.
While Labiana is doing that, Astartes is more looking at it from an occult point of view. See if he can decipher the ritual that we use, the occult symbols and stuff like that. Standard diff?
All right. Yeah, this is going to be difficulty 6.
Occult.
All right. Andronimus, you don't really know what you're looking at. You recognize a ritual of power, of course, just from the sight alone. You didn't need any kind of descriptor for that. Astartes, the more you look at these symbols, the more you realize there's some sort of coherent pattern to them. This is not random. It is... You look, you don't dare touch. But there are... there's some sort of... You just can't quite grasp it, but you realize that there is a language to these. Labiena, you too notice this. And as you look on the ground, you see that there are symbols and signs of power. The altar within, you catch a glimpse with your auspex. The altar itself is covered in old blood, sacrificial items. There are bones within the standing stones, placed carefully and deliberately. There are patterns worn into the dirt that the wind has not blown away. You feel, given enough time, you could probably trace out the pattern of footsteps that were taken during the last ritual dance through here. And you, of course, all gather from the description that all of these things combined are a means of bringing spirit and blood into a binding compacts with the land, to forge a connection between the points of power here that will spread as a spiderweb network, getting slightly weaker and slightly weaker as the distance gets greater and greater, but yet will give her access, extend the range of her powers, and enhance her in her domain to an unknown degree. Albina, are you gonna roll?
Oh, I not tried that was all voice. I thought it was only Labiena and Astartes.
Or were you not going to do the examination?
If I can, yes, I'm going to
Yeah,
take it.
absolutely. Albina, with your number of successes, you recognize similarities. I don't... Has your character ever met a Leonin before?
No.
No. Yes, you have. Carthage.
Yeah.
Yes.
Matt perhaps gives the wrong impression, but yeah.
You seem to recognize these symbols, and you remember a fight in a cavern of Carthage, and the plants responding to this witch's command. ripping and tearing at your flesh, and for a moment you're back in that fight. Your coterie at your side, your beloved chilled at your back, knowing that outside of the cavern that you were in was certain death, fire, house to house fighting, the rivers, literally the streets running knee deep in blood. And you remember the plants in the garden responding at the command of this witch, and glowing runes on the witch's skin, which you instantly lock on and recognize on these stones.
These symbols. The last time I saw them in Carthage.
Where did you see them?
In a garden, underground garden, watched over by a group of cultists and the mistress. She carved similar icons over her body, and with them she had great control over the plants that dotted the garden.
Are you sure they were the same symbols? Because out of character, I'm presuming Labiena would remember what Alban is describing here.
Now that she's pointed it out, you do see the similarities.
What did
Huh.
the witches do exactly? How does it work?
I am not quite sure, although Hatshepsut seemed to be more familiar with it than any of us.
Do we still have the guide with us?
Yeah, he's standing a discreet distance nearby.
I look at Albina and Labiana. Do you guys remember the symbols for a later time if I want to ask you to make a copy of it? I speak in Phoenician.
I do remember the symbols of the cave, yes.
Okay, then I'm not gonna ask the guide if we can copy the same. I'm just
Uh,
gonna, and a later time, I'm gonna interview
how,
Albina and Labiana
how much
for the
etiquette does a
information.
Stardust have? What's your etiquette score?
3.
Yeah, you would know that would be an incredible social faux pas.
Yeah, that's why I asked Albina and Labiana first.
Yeah. I suppose Labiena would sort of just take a brief kind of glance over them again, try and make a mental note, so turn back to him and give him a head nod.
He's standing there. His head looks up and away, and then he looks to you and he says, "The Vivod is ready to see you." He leads you.
Before he leaves us, I would not like to ask him a final question.
You're gonna have to ask it while you're walking.
Yeah, she's going to be asking as she walks with him. Um, does the voivode enjoys arts, enjoys song, music, and dance, enjoys theatrics?
He actually finds it difficult to answer this question because says, the music. The only music I've ever known the Vivod to listen to has been the music of the wind. As for art, entertainment, that's something you will get to see in a short while. He leads you away past the pools of water once more, continues on in that direction, and to the edge of the wall of ice and tumbling rocks that make up the delineation of the glacier.
Actually, I would have been interested to know what kind of expression the guide had on his face when he was telling us that.
Carefully blank. You get the impression, and mind you, he has called himself the Steward, never given a name, never taught you. Since none of you asked about his past history, he has not volunteered it. The impression that you are left with is that the best way to survive here has been to be faceless and useful. So he leads you to the glacier, but not quite on it once more. Leads you to the edge. Begins to slowly and carefully pick his way among the piles of snow and ice. There's loose rocks that shift unexpectedly underneath his steps. And finally, he gets down on his hands and knees and slips into the opening in a crack of ice. You find yourself in a small antechamber. It's completely dark. And he strikes flint to steel and lights a small lamp. In front of you, you see a very low tunnel. You have to get on your hands and knees, and possibly even your belly, and begin to crawl through the tunnel. So he leans down and he looks back at you and he says, watch the roof. It says sharp. And begins to crawl kind of military style. Knees, elbows, with the lantern out in front of him. Casting enough light over his shoulder that you can see that the roof of this tunnel is a mix of ice and rock with sharp shards of rock and pointed stalactites. Nature's razors pointed down, ready to pierce and rend those who are unwilling or unhumble. I assume you all follow him through the opening.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
He takes the lead, of course. He crawls and crawls and crawls, and finally he gets to a point where he can begin to get up onto his... he can raise up off of his belly and then eventually stand up. And you find yourself standing in the opening under an overhang of rock. And overhead, you see that this rock arches over you in a natural arch. And it completely... You would be in a cave, except at the center of what would be the roof, there's a large opening that has been carved by wind and water. And the opening is large enough that you can see the moonlight and starlight shining down inside of this cavern. You see, directly opposite you, there is another opening into the cavern that you could walk in and out of. And as you gaze in the light of the lantern, looking around, you see that this is really somewhat similar to the atrium of a Roman house, just carved by nature. It's a central hub. There are other cracks in the rock, hewn tunnels where you can see a servant or two moving in and out. It's roughly circular. And right next to where you're standing is a figure that is trapped in a block of ice. Looks to be a young man in his early 20s, dirty blonde hair, pretty handsome guy. And amidst all of that, all of these details you're trying to pick up, You see, standing in the center of this atrium is the Selassie. Astartes, you recognize it immediately. Its face is turned towards the sky. It is dressed in thin, light white leather. It has antlers on its forehead, horns of bone that are yet the color of pure glacier ice. There's a web of sparkling spider crystal hanging between the antlers, draping and swaying gently. Its form is androgynous, quite thin and tall. It sways in the breeze, kind of reminds you of a thin sapling tree swaying gently in a breeze. It's not hideous, it's not ugly, it's not, and nor is it incredibly attractive. But there is an undeniable presence that demands you acknowledge it. It's incredibly tough to tear your eyes away from it.
So you could imagine Labiena sort of walking in, first noticing the block of ice with the gentleman in it, and just kind of gazing fascinatingly at it, wondering, whether or not the man is dead, etc., etc.
That's a good question.
Trying to
As you
pick up on minor details.
kind of look around and you key in on this figure, you see its eyes swivel and lock onto you, and silently begging you for help.
Well, at that, I suppose Labiena would be like, he's alive. And then, of course, out of the corner of her eye would notice the Selassie and immediately turn her head. Her full attention is now focused on the Selassie.
The steward, as you pay attention, the steward was breathing kind of heavily, and you notice that the wind gently pulses in and out, forming almost a breathing pattern, and the steward has instinctively fallen into sync with this pattern of natural wind breath. And it holds the lantern up. He holds the lantern up, and you see a few bits of primitive artwork on the walls. And he speaks in Dacian. Do any of you speak Dacian?
Yes, I believe that Flavia has command of that language to a point.
Good. Well, Flavia, you understand what he's saying. And he says, he steps up and he conspicuously takes a rock and moves it with his foot to make a grating noise. And you see the Selassie's head move in the direction of the sound. And he says, Voivode of mountains, Koldun of ice, Master Selassie, may I present visitors from Rome. Then he turns and speaks to you in Latin. Step forward one at a time and present yourselves.
Obna takes a step forward, lowering herself until her hair is touching the ground, and without looking directly at the eyes of the Selassie, keeping her eyes lowered to her feet, to the feet of the host. Mistress, Voivode of the Alps, Voivode Selassie, I am Albina Palace of Clena Sombra.
It nods. It recognizes your introduction.
Astartes approach. Likewise, just like Albina, he bows and says, Mistress of the Mountain, I am Astartes of the children of Akim.
Again, it acknowledges your introduction.
Labiana will similarly take a step forward, bow her head, dip her body, eyes down. Mistress Voivod Talasi, I am Labiana Celia of the clan La Sombra.
Of the clan La Sombra?
Ups, Capulation, sorry. I don't know where I got La Sombra from. I'm tired. I'm sorry. Of the clan Cappadocian.
It nods its head, and when it does, you can see that spider web kind of sways gently in the motion of its head.
It, Androsimus will step forward, give, bow as everyone is. For vote, I am Androsimus of the Ravnos. It is an granted hospitality tonight.
Flavia, being the youngest, would step forward last and do a curtsy bow and then say, Mistress Voivode, I am Katharina Flavia of Clan Toreador. I am honored to meet you, and I thank you for your gracious hospitality. And then she would step back.
At that one, it actually, the corner of its mouth quirks, and what might be pleasure at your formality and courtesy. The Selassie speaks in Dacian, with the steward translating. Flavia, you find that the steward is giving you a pretty faithful translation. And it speaks. It says, "Welcome to my domain, travelers of Rome. I trust your needs have been met this night: warmth, water, food, and safety, and soon shelter." And it looks to each of you just to make sure that nothing has been skipped.
We have been provided with all that we have needed and asked. It has been uh, your steward has been treated us with all the respect that courtesy demands.
Yes, we all thank you very much for your hospitality.
Indeed.
Indeed.
Then it speaks again. It says, "The world is at rest tonight. Be at ease. I would hear all about you and your many travels and travails." It waves to you to follow and turns and exits out the cavern, that exit that you had seen. And it leads you up to the top of a hill, and there is a magnificent view of snow spread out before you, and somewhere down below you can smell just distantly a little bit of fire smoke and sense that there's a village somewhere in the trees below your sightline. But for now it sits completely at ease in the environment. If you guys like, you may make a perception plus alertness roll with aspects applicable if you're using it to just take note of your surroundings. There are physical guardians out there.
Ouch.
Yeah. Labiana, you don't much care. You are entirely fascinated with the Selassie. You're just ignoring anything else that's going on. Androdimus, you actually catch a glimpse. You're a seasoned traveler. Yes, there are spiritual guardians. There are also physical. Androdimus, you see at least one bear prowling outside, but it's not. It's white. Whether that's fur or armor of some kind, you don't know.
Could be both.
There are people, but they keep a healthy and respectful distance, and as said, the Voivode seems at ease, perfectly comfortable. It sits in the snow and ice, relaxes against a rock, gestures for all of you to make yourselves comfortable, and the steward says, the Voivode would hear of how you met, each of you.
Abner takes one of the seats in front of the Voivode. She's going to raise an eyebrow at the nature of the question before looking over to the others. Which one of us would you like to hear first? Voivode Salazar.
It indicates it doesn't care. Whichever one of you would like to speak. It has plenty of time to hear it all.
Then perhaps we should begin from. Should we begin from? She looks over to the others. Should we begin from the newest member of the coterie and work backwards, or should we start from the oldest one?
It nods. Your first suggestion sounds good.
She then looks over to Flavia.
Flavia seems to be a little bit embarrassed because she's silent for a moment. She's trying to gather her thoughts. And when she finally speaks, her voice is very quiet, but it's firm so that it carries across the room. And she introduces herself once again. Says, I'm Katerina Flavia, but I prefer to use Flavia after my father, whom I miss very much. And I met the coterie by quite a violent accident. She goes on to explain how it was that her master took her out of the house one evening and they went to see what he called these games that she might enjoy. And she was scooped up by a man whom she had never seen before, and later learned that he was Alexander. And he didn't seem to take a liking to the way that her master, sire, Marcus, was dealing with his children. And so an argument ensued where her sire was basically thrown down to fight two bears. He had been proven to have disrespected his host and broken some of the cardinal rules of vampires society. And he was then subsequently torn apart by the bears as she watched. As her sire died, she was taken under Alexander's wing and became his adopted child. And then from that point on, she says, I was introduced to this coterie who became my new family. She pauses at this point. See if there's any questions from the voivode.
The voivode dismisses the steward and begins to speak to you guys in Latin. It's clear that Latin is not its preferred language. It has to pick its words very, very carefully. I'm curious. Did you enjoy it? Did you enjoy your brief glimpse of freedom?
Flavia admits that yes, she did. My sire was a monster. He deserved to die.
It nods. It seems to be considering asking another question and then decides against it. And then asks a different one. Do you enjoy this freedom here, outside of the city, more than you do city life? Being under the watchful thumb of this Alexander?
Flavia doesn't really know how to respond to that and give it justice because she claims she's only known city life up to this point and she's been out here only for a short while by comparison. So it's too early for her to judge. And Alexander has been nothing but fair with her and guided her progress as a vampire, which is something that her former sire was very restrictive with. He decided what she should know and what she should not know, and what he allowed her to know was very precious little. So he exerted a considerably larger amount of control than Alexander does, at least from what she can tell right now.
It nods. It seemingly doesn't, unperturbed by your rambling thoughts. It kind of recognizes that you haven't given that much thought to it. Then it looks to the next member, kind of looks around at you guys to see who's stepping up next.
Danazay, mistress, I'm the second newest member of this coterie, though I've seen them from time to time during the war in Carthage, and after that, I became familiar with them when I was approached by my ally Alexander to fulfill the ancient role of my clan, to act as judges and to judge between a case between them and another Canite in the state of Rome. And after that, that's when I joined the coterie. And I'll go on explaining the whole case and how everything went.
And it just kind of stares at you for a second. Has their company been good for you?
He thinks about it a little while. It it did has it moments of up and down, but on the whole, I feel it has opened my eyes to a different way of living Canite life.
Is different good or bad?
They have provided me certain freedoms that I did not have when I was back under the watchful eye of my clan. So I'm still learning. I'm new to this lifestyle also, but I'm still learning, and I believe it has been a positive experience until now.
Until now.
We do not know what the future holds, mistress.
It relaxes a little bit at the. You realize that it tensed up a little bit at the implication that your particular phrasing had implied that this was a horrifying and terrible experience. And it seems to be thinking of another question to ask you. It says, of what of your control? I see in your eyes that you fail. You are fading. Are they here to help you? Are you here to ask for help?
So I'm here to ask help for another member of this coterie. I dare not ask help for myself, because I believe there's something I have to figure out for myself. And if I cannot figure it out, I hope that these coterie members will be the one that will put me out.
And nods his head in respect to that answer. It can definitely appreciate wanting to go out on your own terms and not relying on outside offers. Then it looks around to see who's next.
Strictly speaking, Voivode, I am not precisely a full member of this coterie, but I believe I would have been the one who became associated with them before a status, a bit before a status. At the time, I believe a status mentioned, out of character, it was Valoronius, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, just blanked for a second, but yeah. Just mentioned Valoronius and the disputes that occurred between them and him. Valoronius was my former patron, and I met them while they were on their task. Since we worked together on that affair, and since then occasionally, uh, we have occasionally joined efforts since, including what brings us here now.
But why do you stay with him?
Currently, there is something I must do that I will need assistance for, and before I could ask that assistance of them, I must I must offer them assistance in turn.
Tell me more of your history. These children, these Ravnos, they are of great mystery.
The truth is that many of my own experience of my clan is second-hand, so to speak. My sire is the only one that I've spent significant time with, I would say. But and he's basically going to try and relay as best as he's able the general story of the clan being from India, how unlike in the West, where it tends to be very much only associated with the with a sort of criminal element. In back home, it's on every level of the social order, and how their purpose is supposed to be to resist. How their initial purpose was supposed to be to ward off demons and protect a cycle that Androtomos fully admits he doesn't fully understand. How after a time, branches of the clan moved on from their homeland, and how his branch has taken it upon themselves to alleviate the ills wrought by less responsible members.
It listens to you recount this history. I think for many of you, you've probably never heard this before either, so it's equally fascinating to you. And when you finish, it nods and looks to see who is next to speak.
Oh, it's obviously Labiena speaks up this time. I joined the coterie a long time ago. It seems like many lifetimes. But after a long time in out of character, I can't remember the name of the word, but you know, that term between embrace and the time you spend with your sire before they kind of see you off into the world. I forget what that's called. But yeah, after my time with my sire, I was sent on a mission by someone who would later become our coterie's patron, who is now our former patron. We, of course, now have a new patron in Alexander. But I was sent to locate something for our former patron, Lady Artemis. And after finding said item, I was then taken to another location to meet with the other members of the coterie and Artemis's other God, my brain's not working very well right now.
Other clients.
Clients, thank you. And one of which, well, the only other remaining member of that group of the older members of the coterie, and she turns to Albina, is Miss Albina. And I've been with them ever since.
And what did you find, if I may ask, so fascinating about my circle of stones?
Laviena, of course, will carefully consider her answer to this question. But we'll say, I was perhaps more fascinated with the behavior of the blood which had left the various bodies. And how it was able to spread itself over the pillars. That was what fascinated me.
You're not exactly telling a lie. You're not telling the whole truth. So, let's make a manipulation plus subterfuge roll, keeping in mind your social penalty of eerie presence.
Indeed.
So we're going to say difficulty 7. You may spend
7.
willpower on this. You need 5 successes to make her believe you.
I think I probably would need to spend a willpower on this.
You can spend more than one, because you really need this.
Yeah. I think 2 might be the way to go.
Okay?
You wouldn't want to spend any more than that.
All right. It doesn't react, but there's something in its eyes that knows you're not telling the whole truth. And it doesn't yell at you. It doesn't like attack you or nothing like that. But you can see that it understands that you are concealing some stuff from it, and it knows that. For better or for worse.
Now, that's something it may or may not use against me later on.
And finally, looks at Albina, looks to see what Albina says.
Well, I believe that my story will be first of all the story of how this coterie even got started. Lady Mistress Artemis called upon us in Rome nearly a century ago by this point. There, I and um, 5 others, uh, is it 5 or 4 others? I think it was 4 others. I and 4 others gathered together and christened into her client as her clients. Uh, We took the opportunity that she granted us. Unfortunately, those four met their deaths most over the years. The first of them, who's met final death, as a slumber, like myself, a man by the name of Lucius. Yet, it, yet despite all of that, have been able to find others that had joined a coterie, others that have kept me from being by myself, others that have taken the place of those that have left us. Together we together have been through much, from the siege, from uh, running the errands and the requests of our mistress, of our old mistress Artemis around the Mediterranean, to siege in Carthage alongside her, from witnessing the fall of Hannibal, his mad drive through the peninsula, and from rooting out the influence of Balai from the Greek cities. It has been a very eventful time that we all had together.
Would you characterize your time? No. Would you say that your existence in Rome has been existence of death? Or
Yes,
yes, an existence of death.
yes. Death either mine allies or that of my enemies, but existence surrounded by death. Yes.
And is that something you seek to bring into my domain?
No.
What Why then do you come to see me? Surely not to exchange pleasantries among the snow.
I come to see you to request a favor, to plead for your aid in saving one of our coterie members, in assisting me in lessening the death that surrounds me.
It nods. Was this the among your cart?
The one in the cart, yes.
Tell me about it.
Hatshepsut, a woman from distant lands from across the Mediterranean. She comes from the land of Egypt. She has been the hmm, she's been the I describe her as the heart of a coterie, or perhaps the soul would be more accurate description of her position. She has been one of the more spiritually attuned in more among us, in more worldly beliefs, more worldly powers. With her, we have managed to not just uh, not just progress or abilities, mystical abilities. It's not she has been a great aid in progressing all of her mystical abilities and also in progressing or influence amongst the mortal kind. She has also been proven to be a dear friend of ours, often going out of her way to aid us, even if puts herself in less than favorable situations, although I get the feeling that she enjoys some of the suffering that she's been put through, even if she might not outright admit it, outright uh, speak it.
I see. I will contemplate this. Why don't I have my stewards show you your quarters while I think and make preparations?
Mr. Voivode Salines, before we are shown to our quarters, may I ask you a question?
I respect your brutal honesty about yourself, so yes, I will grant you a question.
Mm, there is something that I asked your steward but he was unable to answer. Your tastes in entertainment, your tastes in music and arts. Do you have a enjoyment of the craft? The craft of theatrics, the craft of dancing?
Of what competition is human dance and theatrics when one has spent seasons watching the mating rituals of a bear or the dance and plumage of birds, seeking so strongly to attract the opposite sex, or to watch lizards puffing out in sunlight, or to see the displays of bullfrogs, the dance and clash of rutting males, stags clashing over and over, breaking horns. No, I find that the art and music of humanity is a far cry and a pale imitation of what they seek to achieve, of what nature achieves on its own.
Thank you for enlightening me to your tastes.
And even as you talk about it, um, there's a slight gust of wind and a little blowing snow kind of flecks against you. You feel it, bing, 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 impact your cheeks just a little bit. And the Selassie kind of half closes his eyes and listens as it echoes. Those of you with auspex who have been striving to pay attention to your surroundings get just a faintest glimpse of what she means by the music of nature. She says, I will I will have my steward escort you to the village down below tomorrow. There you will be pleased to note that you may shop amongst what few goods it might have to offer, one such as yourselves, to avail yourselves of its people and hospitality. I will have an answer for you the following evening. Now, please. And the steward comes around and stands there. Allow us to show you to your quarters, that you may rest in comfort.
Thank you, mistress. And I bow.
Company Lois herself. Thank you for your, thank you for for having us as your guests, Voivode Selassie.
Lavinia will also give a bow of respect. Thank you.
They escort you back into the caves. The steward specifically does. For all of her kind words, the lodgings are pretty bare. Each quarters area is a small hewn room. You can tell it's been carved out of the rock. It's got a candle, a very rough wooden desk. It's got a smooth piece of shale, flint, or limestone that serves as a top. On the floor, there's a shallow basin that's been carved into the stone. And it's cold. Sub-freezing temperature of the ice is seeped into the rock and the air around you. There's a very rough slab of wood that's been bolted and joined together to give you a modicum of privacy in the form of a door. He does take care to point out that the Selassie's quarters are of pretty similar quality. They're just larger. It doesn't have a lot of use for feather beds and high-class amenities. There's no writings, there's no library. The only art that you see is in the form of, there's many stone carvings that are just, it's like they got done and then got thrown on the floor. And on the surface of the cave walls, there are many primitive paintings. No Michelangelo stuff here. No, just kind of stick figures, amorphous shape style primitive art. And we're going to take a break here, so we'll come back in 20 minutes. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
All right.
Sounds good.
All right, so we're back. You guys are provided privacy and the opportunity to consult amongst yourselves and decide what kind of price you might be willing to pay, depending on what the Selassie wants.
Contrary to what I experienced during my last visit, this phase of the Selassie is particularly different. I feel oddly at peace here. I do not know about the rest of you.
I don't mean to sound disrespectful, but a lot of this stuff that I'm seeing, our surroundings, are as fascinating as they are creepy. And I would lie if I pretended that I understand everything that is going on, but I am trying and willing to learn. So just kick me in the shin if I do anything that is considered a faux pas. Because I truly feel out of my element.
You've been doing alright, little one. When in doubt, just stay quiet and don't speak unless spoken to. But you've been quiet throughout this whole journey. What's bothering you?
Do you really want to know?
If I didn't, I would not have asked.
Well, you could just be trying to be nice and make conversation, but if you honestly want to know, I will tell you. I just hope that you don't think any less of me. And don't necessarily attribute my feelings to the fact that I am a young vampire. But because there's still a lot of leftover human instincts that I feel roaming around me when the beast does not take hold. So, if you're still up for hearing me out, I will tell you.
And I smiled an inviting smile for her to continue.
Normally, I would probably try to weave my answer into a story, maybe full of metaphors, such as writers used, poets. But I'm going to be very plain and very direct about this. Ever since we have embarked on this journey, I have felt an incredible amount of fear.
Fear of what?
Well, as you recall, I was shot with an arrow through the heart and barely escaped with my life. If it wasn't thanks to you guys saving my butt, I certainly couldn't have saved myself. And it made me realize how inadequate I am in whatever role I'm supposed to be playing, because I'm certainly not presenting a poem. I am not playing a song on my flute. I'm not dancing. But I'm here and I'm trying to be helpful, and I just feel like fish out of water. I try to summon up my courage, and in certain times it's here. If it deals with speaking with someone, doing any sort of social interaction, that's not so bad. But whenever we are in danger, I just feel like I want to run all the time and leave everyone behind. I don't even think of anyone else except myself. Is that how it's supposed to be? And is that how it's going to be all the time? Will I ever find my courage to withstand whatever physical blows come my way? What must I do? Help me.
I suppose on a fundamental level, all of us will take the same route as you when we feel that our own lives will be threatened. But the difference is how long it takes to get to that point. And the only way to increase that time is by experience. You're still new to the night. You have not actually been in combat before. So you're not doing anything wrong at the moment. That knowledge comes with time, with experience. During our last combat, when you ran away, all of us would have ran away. Most of us ran away also because we saw it was a losing battle. That's just our instinct kicking in. You're new, so you still have a lot to learn. But if you really want to learn, you can ask Baribal for some pointers. When I was newly embraced, I could not even throw a punch. And by working with him and those within my clan, I found my specialty. What I can do to be of service during a combat. And don't sell yourself short. If it wasn't for your ladder, we would not be here at this moment. So you are helping us in your own way. You just have to find your way, what fits for you during combat.
I hope that you know and understand how much being here means to me, given the fact that I never really had a vampire family before, and I'm not going to count my sire as that, because he was anything but. So I don't want to jeopardize falling out of favor with my new family. I will gladly accept any advice or pointers that you or anyone else can offer me, and I will certainly love to be able to train in basic combat once we are maybe back in Rome, where the situation lends itself more to me being able to do that. So I thank you ahead of time.
Don't mention it. Until then, just stick to your strengths. Your strength is dealing with people. Mine is blood magic and being a diplomat, so stick to them. And you will not go wrong until you learn how to fight.
Can I ask you something different?
Sure.
Not on the topic of me, but what did you feel when you saw that person encased in that solid block? What was the first feeling that you felt? Or did you feel anything when you saw him?
You have to understand, this is not my first time visiting the Salasi. My first time visiting the Salasi, I saw a whole different Salasi. A being so powerful that your soul will quake in fear just to even speak to it. So when I saw that person in the eyes, my only response was, it's not my problem. Because one misstep and you will find yourself encased in that block of ice. The Selassie might be pleasant at this moment, but she's an old Knight. You have to keep that in mind, that they do not think like us. What for us is a minor mistake, for them is reason enough for them to kill you. So that's why my earlier suggestion, when in doubt, stay quiet. Don't speak unless spoken to. I do not want to scare you, but I want to show you the true ways of our kind. I believe the Selassie is older than those Kenites in Rome. There may be one or two that's older than her, but when you're dealing with old Kenites, they do not think like humans. Keep that in mind.
Yeah, I wasn't really sure what to think when the Selassie spoke to me. It's very curious. I don't even know if anything I said placated her, but I guess since we're all still here, we're not doing too badly. But I will tell you this, when when I saw that man, I felt pity and an instant wave of shame. Like I wanted to feel both, and they were kind of both fighting each other until shame finally won out. And I think that's the reason why I wasn't saying anything or didn't even make a face that would indicate how I felt. That's what held me back.
Why shame? I can understand pity for the man, but why shame when you saw the man?
I felt shame that I felt any pity or compassion for so insignificant a person that was obviously there for a reason. And I did not know what that reason was. And like you said, it's none of my business. But at the same time, part of me wanted to do something to help him in his current state. And another part was saying, how can you feel bad for this person? You are 100 times better than him. You are an immortal. And I don't know if that was the beast whispering to me or what, but it feels like I have voices in my head all the time now.
Voices, you say? What kind of voices do you feel like you're having in your head?
Just conscience, conscience talking, and then this other voice which comes from deeper from within me, from who I really am or who I am meant to be. Human versus vampire, they are currently at odds, and I don't really know what that means, but maybe that's how it's supposed to happen.
That's the daily struggle when you walk the road of humanity. It is a noble road, and if you abandon that road, it's very hard for you to regain those values. It is what that keeps you feeling human in this moment, that stops you from becoming the beast. So my advice, retain your humanity as long as possible. Because without it, you might find yourself turning into something that you do not like, not wish to be.
But you do not follow this road.
There was a time when I walked that road, and at this moment, I find myself questioning myself. Do I really feel at peace walking my current road? Because I remember back then I felt really at peace, one with myself. And right now I only feel sadness, regret, and duty. No peace.
How do you plan to regain this peace, or are you giving up on it?
That's the most difficult part. I do not know how to regain it. I'm still looking for it.
Before I became a vampire, my father used to put me on his knee when we would sit in front of the house after dinner, and he would always tell me to stay true to myself, no matter what happens in my life. It will give me a sense of peace.
That is a sound advice. Keep it in mind for when you are in doubt and you feel like you're straying.
Perhaps you could take that advice to heart as well.
It has been so long since I walked the road of humanity. At this moment, I do not feel like I know what is my true self.
I understand. I'm here for you if you ever need to talk about any of these things, as I know you are here for me. I appreciate it. Thank you, Astartes.
And I appreciate it. And for the first time in a long time, I sit and meditate.
I think Flavia would watch Astartes for a while, and just watching him meditate would calm her quite a bit too. She'd get into a sort of a Zen mode herself, and while not meditating, she'd be partially at peace just watching her friend.
Is there any other conversations that will take place tonight before settling in to your icy quarters?
I do have one OOC question, if I may.
Sure.
We have each been given our own separate quarters, correct?
Yes, and there's a common area where you guys could talk. Plus, you could, of course, go to each other's chamber as well.
Okay, yeah, that was my next question. I wanted to know if there was any guards posted at the doors or anything
Nope.
like that.
No guards. No obvious like soldiers walking around. By all accounts, by everything you've been able to observe, nobody told you had to stay in your rooms.
Okay, then in that case, I think Flavio would take a stroll down the hallway. Unless she has to crawl, I forget. But no, I think they walked, right?
Nope. Yeah.
And,
Through the complex, you can walk.
okay.
You if you want to go back to the standing stones, you have to crawl through that opening. But
In that case, I think she would like to sort of walk around and see if she could find Albina's quarters.
yeah, it's just down a hall, around a curve, right there.
And if there is a door, she would knock on it or just knock on the wall.
There's
there is no
rough
door.
semblance of a door.
Okay, then she is knocking.
Hearing the knocking, Albina lifts herself up from the bed and walks over to open the door. Yes?
Hello, Albina. I'm sorry to interrupt your rest. I was wondering if... And she kind of starts fidgeting a little bit. Swallows, looks up at her and says, can I stay with you tonight?
She tilts her head to the side, looking a bit confused at first and also a bit surprised. But then she nods, stepping aside to make room for her to enter the bedroom.
Thank you. I just want to make sure that you understand I'm only here to not be alone. Trying not to tell Albina that she's afraid, but you can sort of, if you looked at her hands, you'd see that she's sort of squeezing her hands together, and her whole form is very fidgety, nervous, and she does not feel comfortable in these surroundings.
As she walks inside, Albina closes the door, noticing her fidgety hand. She's going to walk over to her, grab her hands, and gently pry them apart and hold them together and hold them in her own hands. Child, you are shaking. Are you that disturbed by my presence?
No. This place, those bodies on the rocks, everything about this place is just very creepy. Why do we always go see creepy things?
What you find creepy, others might find to be exotic, beautiful.
But I can't understand this kind of beauty. This is not what my senses perceive as beautiful.
Of course it isn't. Your blood is not the blood of a host. You have not been raised uh, by the masters of a host, by the size of a by the style of a host.
Don't take this the wrong way, but if it wasn't for you and Astartes, I would completely not want to come along because you guys are the only good-looking people I can focus on when I have to look at all these other corpses and stench of death. And sure, I understand different traditions and rituals, but sometimes it's just too much, and I apologize. I will try to do better. This is not our way. I understand that. I'm still thinking in some small human terms. But I appreciate staying with you tonight.
There is nothing to apologize for. Your sire has kept you sheltered, has kept you away, has robbed you the opportunity to be introduced to the other clans and their manners. It is not your fault that you find yourself out of place at this moment.
Well, I just hope I come out of this phase sooner rather than later. And if it's okay, I can sleep right on the floor. I just don't want to be alone in a room tonight.
You may take the bed.
I can also sleep sitting up, by the way. I've had to do that a lot with Marcus. I will take as little space as possible, I promise.
I don't require a great deal of space for my meditations, nor for my prayers.
That is 2 I owe you now. Maybe 3.
She raised an eyebrow. What do you mean?
Well, you did save me once from the arrow. And now you're offering me your hospitality, and your privacy is being shared. You don't have to do any of these things, but you did them anyway. And I'd like to think it's because you do this out of kinship, and not because of your fear of Alexander. I mean, if it is, don't tell me. I'd rather not know.
We are far away from Alexander's gaze. Much could happen that he would never need to know about. I do not need to fear him in here.
You speak the truth. I will let you tend to your meditation and perhaps undergo one of my own. She walks over to the side and just sits on the corner of the bed, pushing herself up against the wall. And cross-legged, she closes her eyes and just thinks on the events of the night.
There is a question of my own that I desire to ask of you, child.
Eyes pop open. Yes?
Why did you came here? There are other members of the coterie whose doors are as open as mine.
Well, truthfully, because I thought that going to a male member of the coterie may give off the wrong idea, and I'm not so sure that Mistress Labiena and I would be comfortable with each other. Although I will say that though she is not my favorite person to look at, she's still fascinating to me. She deserves a lot of respect, but I would not disrespect her by having her to look at me in case that bothers her. If that makes sense.
I doubt it bothers her. If anything, over the years I have gotten the impression that she rather enjoys the reaction that her appearance elicits out of others.
I just hope that, however she looks in my eyes, that it doesn't bring her any suffering, you know? I've always wondered, but I don't have the nerve to ask her directly. Does it hurt her to experience all that stuff that happens to her flesh? Does she have to bear any pain?
I do not believe I ever saw her suffering under that, no.
Flavia emits a huge sigh of relief, of it, as if it's some kind of a personal burden that's been lifted off her shoulders, because intimately, she would rather not see anybody suffer, and especially somebody that has the appearance of the Cappadocian, which she doesn't know much about the clan yet, so she's trying to get some indirect knowledge of them through Albina.
Would you have noticed the way how the Salai seemed to be pleased with the way how Flavia introduced herself when we first came into her room?
Yeah, I believe you would. I think you guys would have been attuned to every shifting mood and glance because of the all the things you have heard about Zamisi, her clan, all the stuff from Astartes. I think you guys would have been hyper alert for that stuff.
Her host seemed to take a liking to you.
I didn't notice, but I am glad that I wasn't hurt. So I must have done something right. Astartes said that I should keep quiet and not speak unless spoken to when in her presence.
We are her guests, not her servants. But a modicum of respect and subservience is required from our position, yes. His advice is a wise one.
He said that she was a very ancient vampire.
I am not certain about her age, but even the Prince of Rome had to pay tribute to her in order to secure her assistance in the war against Carthage. I'd imagine that her, I imagine that her power is quite legendary.
Yeah, I think I'll follow Astartes' advice. I thought maybe at some point she'd ask me to recite poetry or some such thing to please her, but thankfully she did not ask for it, and I felt like, my goodness, I am going to start the poem in Greek and finish in Latin by the time I'm done because I was so taken with the presence and then the man in the rock, and everything is just so conflicting, you know? She's beautiful, but she's also, I don't want to call her cruel, but I don't know how else to say what she does with the people that she chooses for her rituals. I don't understand it.
It is no cruelty, child. She's just utilizing the tools that she has available to her.
Do you know what she does with these people?
Yes, I was there for the description of the ritual.
I think I will be happy when we get back to Rome. No offense, but this has been one crazy adventure.
It's not going to be your last adventure together. There's going to be others that I imagine will be just as crazy as this one, if not more so.
Yeah, but I miss the theater. I miss audiences gathering by the moonlight. Sweet sound of the flutes and ciders playing in the evening breeze. And I haven't heard them for a while.
You'll be given an opportunity to play once again. That is something I can assure you.
Thank you for giving me hope.
It's not hope, child. Hope is just a step on the road to disappointment. It's just the reality that that I am giving to you.
You are a cynic. I think you would make a great actress.
Then perhaps we have the opportunity to put a show together.
Flavia seems very excited by this prospect, and her eyes are sparkling and wide, and she's already running ideas through her head. I'll let you know if I come up with anything. And hopefully you won't take it back, because I'd love to see you act.
We will see. Is there anything else that you'd like to speak about, child?
Well, in your opinion, do you think that the Selassie will commit to helping you get your friend back?
I do not know. Truth is that we have very little to offer her, very little reason to help us.
Oh, payment, right? Do you know what she would like?
Everything that we have with us, we gave to her as gifts to have her hospitality. The only thing we can offer is our servitude at this point.
Hmm. Well, she did say she'll give a decision the next night, right? So,
Yes.
I couldn't tell whether she was pleased with the gifts or not. Is it okay to serve more than one master?
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to know this before, if you commit to something as a group. I want to make sure I'm not crossing any lines that should not be crossed, any rules should not be broken.
We will guide you and make sure that you step, that you not overstep yourself.
I trust you. And at that point, I think she's finished with her questions, growing a little fatigued, and falls silent.
Likewise, Albina sits down on the floor and continues her meditations in the abyss.
Is there anybody else who wanted to do something before sleep claimed them? Okay. The day sleep comes, takes you all. You wake up cold, stiff. But yet rested, recovered. Mental exhaustion you may have suffered from yesterday is beginning to clear up. You've regained a willpower point. You do feel slightly drained as per normal when you wake up, as the mystic properties within your blood evaporate to sustain your life. And the steward walks the halls, knocking gently at your doors and asking each of you to meet down the hall in the common area when you are prepared. So, does anybody have anything special they need to do before meeting up with the steward?
Not Labiana.
Nothing I can think of, no.
Nothing for me as well.
Nothing.
Right? You guys head back out. He takes you back to the atrium area. This time as you're standing there, you realize that the ice statue is placed just at the foot of where the sunlight at noon, or at the greatest angle, just where it would be short of that. So it never actually touches sunlight, but it's the threat of it is so close, so very, very close. And as you each pass this person trapped in the block of ice, you can see there's a slight imperfection near the mouth, and the eyes follow each of you as you walk past. The steward seems to pay it no mind, no attention whatsoever. He leads you outside and begins a arduous, snowy track to up the hill, over a ridge, and down into the woods. The snow is quite deep on him, nearly waist deep, despite being high summer. But soon, once below the tree line, the snow begins to drop off, and it quickly thins out, and you find yourself walking on a bed of pine needles. takes about an hour. Once you get to where there's no snow, he follows animal trails down and to a village of probably 600-700 people. You can smell fires. You can see animals. The gates, there are no walls. What you see are animal pens here and there, scattered throughout the area. But there's no walls. And he walks in and begins pointing out to you spots of interest. This is the home of the area smith. This is the person who wove your clothing, where we sheared the wool and spun it into clothes. This one over here is a midwife. So on and says, the Selassie has been pleased with your gift. It says that they will make good breeding stock. It intends to move at least one to this village to be married off for children.
Does the Selassie has many villages like this under her domain?
Yes, there are a few somewhat larger, many that are smaller, scattered here and there amongst the mountains. They are not wealthy. They do mine some gold, some minerals, but for the most part they breed sheep and goats, produce wool, trade. They bring in some passing items, monetary value, sometimes a few slaves from any traveling caravans that may pass through the mountains during the height of summer when it's safest to do so.
Have the villages suffered under the wars, or have the armies stayed away from harming them?
The war has not touched them. Out here they know little of Rome and care less.
Are you from one of such villages?
The question almost takes him by surprise as he stops, like really stops in his tracks, and you almost run into him, and he goes, I don't remember. It's been so long since I thought about it. And he thinks, kind of gets this wispy look in his eyes, and he goes, I actually don't think I'm from here. It's real tough. I remember big streets, stone buildings, lots of people, animals, sound of carts. Yeah, I don't know. It's been so long. I actually don't believe I'm from this area.
So you have been under the servitude of our host for a long while then?
I suppose that's true. But, my life has been service to the Voivode for as long as I can possibly remember.
From what I can hear of his accent and notes from his physical appearance, would I be able to tell, hopefully, where he might be from?
Roll your perception plus medicine, or hearth wisdom. It's a standard difficulty.
Would I be able to recognize this guy?
No, you have no idea who he is. Yeah, Albina, the features, that you've seen so many people over the course of your life, it's real tough to discern.
If you cannot remember your life before service to the voivode, then it's likely that your life before servitude to the voivode is not meaningful.
Well, as I suppose you're correct. I certainly never really think about it. I mean, I suppose I could think about it, but what's the point? Right?
Indeed, why think about a mundane existence when one can walk alongside such incredible beings?
See, you get it. Yeah. I mean, why? You know, if I were to think about anything, you know, outside of this, what would I be doing? Hewing wood? Serving on somebody's farm? Here? I'm somebody.
You get to share in her divinity.
I share via service.
Yes. There's the voivode takes apprentices, takes children.
I have never seen such.
Would you aspire to such position?
I don't know. I've never been asked the question. What? I don't even know how that would work. How to pass on? How would one be determined if they're worthy? That's to wield such forces, to have the power of God. Doesn't sound like me.
Some people are made, some people have been born to serve. If that has been your position, then that is what it shall be.
And most of the time, that decision is not in your hands if you're worthy to be turned or not.
He looks a little bit confused about your phrasing. He doesn't know what you mean by turned.
He will not elaborate about it further.
Have you ever thought about it?
Thought about what?
What it might be like to live as one of us?
I don't know what you mean. That there are none like the Viavod.
And I say in Phoenician, be careful what you speak.
I'll be an all turn for starters. Don't worry.
I've had a life of service. as long as I can remember, and it's all I know. I don't think I need anything more. Eventually, I will die, and what's left of my spirit will continue to serve in the afterlife. I shall nourish her strength and become one physically and spiritually with the domain. I will be part of immortality. To last as long as the earth.
That is all what we can aspire to.
Indeed.
He continues to take you around. It doesn't take too long to make your way through the populace. If there's anybody who wanted to buy more clothing, possibly some like foot wraps, anything decorative stuff, simple jewelry, stuff for the ride home, supplies, anything like that, you can get it here. If not, he simply takes you around and shows you the goods, lets you window shop for a while, and then offers to take you back.
Out of character, how is my resources at this moment? Because we've been surviving on my resources during the trip.
Pretty decent. Once you guys settled in waiting in Cuomo, all you had to do was enough to feed the horses and take care of the animals, because the people could survive on what you could find in the forest, hunting and stuff like that, fishing. So you're sitting pretty decent. I'd say you probably got about 7 or 8 silver in your pocket, which in this region is a pretty good amount of money.
I will gonna buy another spare set of clothing, of foot wraps, and any simple jewelry that will remind me of this place, of the piece that I actually found being here, that I didn't expect I will find.
You get several pieces of wooden jewelry, some carved trinkets, wristbands, some what they would be like a charm necklace, bracelet, that kind of stuff. Yeah, you have several pieces. They're not mystical, but you can tell they were made with care.
That is all that I wish for.
That'd be one single silver piece. Get you a very nice, very thick, strong outfit, weather treated, good for the winters up here. Thick, heavy coat, cloak with a hood. Yeah, it's for 1 silver. That's pretty good. You could probably make a profit if you were to take this back to Rome and sell it.
In that case, I'm gonna buy a few more.
Okay. They have 2 more outfits. Other than that, a lot of their spare stuff has already been given to you guys. So, yeah, you walk out of there 3 silver lighter, but with 3.5 spare outfits. Which, in terms of value, you could sell for 6 silver in Rome. Double your money.
I'm okay to go.
Yeah, and I'll probably just do the usual, replenishment of ritual supplies.
That's
and,
going to be pretty tough
uh,
here.
Whatever she can get, essentially.
If you need anything that's like honeycomb, wax, animal gut, anything made of like animal goods, like a bones or entrails, anything like that, you can get that. The stuff for like your hand of glory, probably not going to find. Well, let's do a percentage roll. I'll say there's 25% chance you might find some useful herbs in the midwife's shop. No, unfortunately she doesn't have anything useful. She's got your typical rural, bark of willow, chew on this herb sort of, mild painkillers. That's about it.
No beans or anything like that.
No.
Also, I did mean to ask, when they provided us with fresh clothing, what sort of clothing were we talking about?
This would be... It's peasant garb, but it's really thick, strong stuff. It's all wool. It's wool with like some rawhide wrappings, laces, that kind of stuff. To tie like this top tights and pull your wrists close. Pull the legs of your feet so the snow doesn't get up in there. To pull them close and tie them down. Pretty thick stuff. Really tough, well made. But it's just wool. It's not real fancy silk or high thread count cotton from Egypt. Nothing like that.
Yeah, that's right. I was just thinking, depending on what it was, Labiana may feel she may need to buy herself a replacement cloak.
You did get a cloak with it, so...
Ah. Yeah, so she wouldn't be looking at any clothes in that case.
Yeah, Stardust is
I'm
pretty
only
much
window
bottom
shopping,
out.
I guess.
So...
Sorry again.
That's alright.
All right. So you get a chance. You wander around, look around. There's some simple like musical instruments, like simple drums, a couple of wood pipes. The stuff you might find in a village to entertain themselves. Stuff made from like deer antler bone, things like that. So if you're not in the mood or market for that kind of stuff, you have a good time looking around. It's different. Better than staring at the bare walls of the cave. And he brings to bring you back. And if nothing else, that takes a good portion of the night. Getting down is much quicker than getting back up, because the steward struggles a little bit because the way is a little steep. And as soon as you guys hit the snow and he's got to start wading through it again, it takes him a while. But finally, you make it back to the cave. Have another day sleep of rest. And before you guys do go to sleep, he lets you know that he says that the Selassie has told him to gather you tomorrow, and your answer will be provided. So, unless you guys have anything else.
I look at the rest of the coterie. What are we gonna provide her in exchange for her help?
First, we shall see what she asks for.
But
My thoughts
what
exactly.
but what are we willing to offer to her? What
We came this far, did we not? I say we must make ourselves willing to provide her anything that she asks for. Otherwise, everything so far has been a waste.
so anything goes. We all agree?
Yes, he provides us with a favor. We are bound to provide her with whatever favor she asks for.
I must agree.
I look at Androtimos.
I'm mostly just along for the ride, but sure, I guess.
Then it is agreed.
You wake. This will be the second full night of your visit. You're entitled to tonight and one more. You are shortly ushered out to the atrium, and the Selassie is waiting for you. It stands there and addresses you once more in Dacian. And has the steward translate. It says, "Your gifts have been acceptable. Their breeding stock will be strong and produce strong children. Their service will go to producing more life. Gifts to you have been offered and accepted in exchange. This then is my offer for your request of reviving your old friend. First, every 2 years, for 10 years, for 5 total times, you will provide 5 more young specimens of breeding stock for me and have them brought here. Second, will be an offer of service for a century." And she looks at Androtimus. "You, young one, see Rome as a prison. You are not meet to wander the confined streets of that stinking, human-infested city. No matter its pleasures, you have a spirit that cannot be confined by the walls and the politics that bind Rome together. You will serve me for a century, and in return, Hatshepsut will be provided back to you."
I look at Androtimos for confirmation if he accepts.
Androtimos seems taken aback by by the um by the that second request, but pauses a while to consider it and eventually does actually nod. Some space from the city for a good while might actually be what I need. Given this, a slight adjustment to the agreement I made with you all, he looks to the coterie. Obviously, I will not be there to track down Mahendra myself. I ask that you keep an eye on him and endeavor to prevent him from getting too much power if you can, and if the opportunity arises, try and have him dealt with, but I understand that that may not be so easy.
Would you like us to capture him alive so that you may have the pleasure, or would his death by our hands suffice?
It is a matter of duty, not pleasure. Just end him.
We will do so.
It will be done.
We
Very
will
well.
do this.
Very well then. I agree.
Selassie nods. The agreement is struck. I go now to revive Hatshepsut. Please, stay in the shelter here. Do not leave. You may wander as freely as you might, and none will stop you. But if you leave these walls before you are given the clear, we will not be held accountable for your fate.
We understand. We will stay within the walls of uh, your throne room.
We thank you for agreeing to assist us with this.
Thank you for your assistance, mistress.
Thank you for your wisdom, time, and hospitality once again.
You provide us with everything that we could have asked for. We are in your debt.
Then I shall depart with haste. And she takes her leave, and she departs out the cave where you walk, and then disappears from sight. It doesn't take long, perhaps an hour, as you look through the roof of the atrium. You see clouds begin to gather and swirl in frantic energy. If anybody had the auspex to see it, what you would see is that Hatshepsut has been laid out on the altar, and her body, over the years, has slowly been healing itself, pulling itself bit by bit, knitting the flesh back together. It's still not 100% whole, but it's almost there. And her body has been laid out, clad only in her amulet magic items. An old man sits at her head. He's almost dead. He's at the end of his life, and he knows that in this ritual, what remains of him is going to flow to Hatshepsut. And the Selassie, who has finally shed her hated clothing and stands nude in the circle, weaves a magic pattern with her feet, swaying through steps as ancient as she is, gathering the mystical forces of nature and earth and life. And the clouds begin to swirl overhead, and you see bursts of heat lightning lighting up the sky. The faint crack of thunder, just barely on the edge of hearing, hint at the gathering mystical forces. As the Selassie dances and chants and dances and chants, at that mystical point of midnight, it steps behind the man, opens his throat, spills his blood and mixes her blood within, rips a vein open on hers, and the combined vitae and lifeblood of the man swirls into Hatshepsut's mouth. And her eyes shoot open, and her body extends, gets tense. All of her fingers go wide in shock, and her toes and her legs shoot up straight. You can actually see her joints distend as her muscles work against their normal direction and then snap back. In Hatshepsut's head, what she remembers last is being caught in life or death battle against some Bruja outside the gates of a home in Capua. And in her waking frenzy, her memories, and her own mystic weather power, she is attuned and connected to the mystic ley lines and weather patterns of the earth itself, all throughout the area. And somewhere down south, a muscular Bruja is riding a horse under a clear night sky. And a bolt of lightning streaks out of the blue, kaboom! Blows him off of his horse. He goes flying, body smoking, clothes blown off of his body. Horse is dead. Just instantly, poof! Just body there twitching. And Bruja lays there in a tree, smoke, steam rising off his body. You can see where his flesh has been burnt and corroded, going, ow, ow, that hurt. What the fuck? Oh my god, that really hurt. And Hatshepsut's eyes open, and her senses return to her, and slowly retract out of the earth itself, and she loses that awareness, that feeling of being connected, and becomes to be herself again. And she wakes up, sits up, weak, mentally exhausted, but herself once more, looking up at the night sky and sitting on an altar. Hatshepsut?
Just still kind of disoriented from the experience, just glances around without a word, trying to piece back together the memories leading up to her torpor, the images during it, the sights she just saw, and how it all fits together into where she is now.
Albina and Labiena. The steward comes to get you and says, the voivode is ready for the two of you. Please come with me.
The two of us? What about Flavia and Androtimus?
He just shakes his head. You two.
Very well.
And he walks out of the cave and through a circuitous route takes you around back to the Standing Stones. And you see Hatshepsut sort of sitting on the altar, her head in her hands, kind of, she doesn't breathe, she doesn't blink, just spaced out And the Selassie, with a mental command, makes Hatshepsut get up and walk out of the standing stones and see the two of you coming towards her.
Where are we?
Seeing Hatshepsut walking once again, I slight twitch of Abner's facial muscle on the muscles on Abner's face, recognizable by the people that have been with her for nearly a century, as a sign of relief. Uh, Fonts before Abner starts answering the Hatshepsut. In the Alps, under the domains of the Voivode Selassie.
Even Labiena could be seen to have the very edge of her mouth sort of curl up just a little bit in recognition of seeing Hatshepsut alive again, so to speak.
How long was I gone?
I believe by now it is about 1 decade or so.
Actually, out of character, how long had it been?
That's pretty close.
What's the last thing you remember?
In the waking world, we were going to we were checking on that Ludus, and I got hit by something.
That something happened to be an enraged Bruja.
Ah,
Yes, I managed to take care of them, but unfortunately not before what happened to you happened. And I do apologize for that on my part.
it is quite alright. I'm sure all efforts were made, and I seem to have been awakened ahead of what the usual schedule would be.
Thanks to your host and her powers.
I suppose I will have to thank her personally.
The Voivode Selassie stands behind you.
Gaining a bit more of her awareness, turns at that and sees the Voivode and gives a respectful bow. Thank you.
It kind of cocks its head a little bit. The icy jewels between its antlers swaying just a hair. Thank you for what?
For reviving me from my slumber.
Ah. Your companions risked much to bring you here and paid the price. Thank them.
All the risks would have been meaningless without your power to do the deed.
Indeed,
Uh,
we could not have done it without you.
Hat will nod to Slothy at that, turning back to them. Where are the others?
They are in the house of the Salais, the Voivode Salais.
Although much has changed.
I see. Well, let's retire for the night. I think I still need some time to properly piece myself together.
I think you're going to be needing a lot more time once you learn of some of the occurrences that happened.
Indeed. But take as much time as you need.
And with that, I actually need to pop away for a second. I will be right back, I promise.
Okay. Right. So the rest of you guys see Labiena and Albina coming in, gently guiding a mostly nude woman of semi-Greek features back into the cavern complex. So Flavia, the woman you see, looks something like this. As soon as I can pull up her sheet, I'll show you. Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. Come on, roll 20. Right. Dark hair. She typically keeps it wrapped up, if now it flies wild. Dark eyes. Her skin was once a caramel tan, but has, of course, faded over the years to the pallor of the vampire, and her lack of humanity is obvious in the fact that she is very pallid. She is not blinking. She is not breathing. She walks and moves without those signs of humanity. And if she practiced it, even before she slumbered, you can tell that she is not at the moment in the habit of even attempting to do so now. They take her immediately to a place where she could rest and kind of get her bearings, and then return back to the chamber to talk to the group.
I think everything went according to plan.
It did, yes.
I'm back.
Welcome back.
Hatshepsut is resting in a chamber.
Yes, our friend has returned to us.
And for that, I am happy for you guys. But first, I'm gonna look. Is the statue of the guy still in the room?
You've noticed it's not actually a statue. He is... Whoever this
Block of
is
fire.
that's in there is mentally alive, and the eyes are moving, following the activity. Are you approaching closely?
Yes.
As you approach, you look and you stare into its eyes. You hear a voice in your head. And you can tell this is coming from him. This is coming from outside. If you help me escape, I will reward you greatly.
But I fear your captor more, and I step back.
There's a mental sigh of resignation as the contact fades.
And I return to the group.
And so you do. Whenever Hatshepsut's ready, she can exit her chamber and rejoin. There has been a set of clothes laid out for her. Plain cotton, or plain wool. Very similar to what the rest of the group is wearing. Hers isn't quite so thick or heavy. It was procured afterwards, and Astartes happened to obtain the rest of the available, very thick garments.
And when I see that she does not have our same kind of clothing that we have, I will provide her one that I bought.
So Hatshepsut, the first time you, like, for a moment see Astartes, what goes through your head knowing that you travel with the child of Hakim? Because you know who Astartes is. It's not a secret.
Probably a mixture of suspicion and intrigue.
I look at her. Relax, Hatshepsut. I tend to judge people by their actions, not the actions of their clans. And I step back.
Well, perhaps either way, I apologize if I'm a bit scattered in my words right now. I'm still piecing everything together.
Perhaps we should introduce you to the newest member of a coterie. The one that came to replace Decius.
Well, it's hardly her.
I have an emotion for Flavia. This is Katerina Flavia, daughter of the clan Toriado.
Flavia would come forward and bow and wait to be acknowledged and spoken to.
Greetings, Flavia. I am Hatshepsut. You don't need to bow to me. Come on.
I apologize, Lady Hatshepsut, but I am still learning the ways of the night. I am fairly new to the vampire life, and my sire has kept me relatively sheltered. So I apologize if I make mistakes every now and then. I am learning every day, and I'm very glad to meet you and see you well.
Indeed, indeed. Hat seems to get a sort of contemplative look before throwing it off. Right then, I believe we will have much to talk about over both the. How much longer are we staying?
Out of character, this is the third night, right?
No, this is the second night. You have the rest of tonight and one more night before you have to depart. Before you have to depart when you wake up, basically.
And I relay that information to the rest.
Well, I think there will be time to catch up further over the next few days and the trip back. Until then, I must ask, what happened to the flowers
The flowers? What flowers?
from the garden? I have a bad feeling.
The flowers from the garden. Nothing looks to be
Laviana.
deep in thought, trying to remember, but obviously coming up blank.
They died. They actually have their
Yeah.
own funerary urn at the Haven.
I won't pretend to be exactly happy about the turn of events, but well, what is done now, and perhaps there is something to learn from it.
Hatshepsut, may I ask, what is it with those flowers? Because when I was at the Cult Haven and I used aspects on them, I had visions that they were from some spiritual garden, a garden of Lilith. Were, was there any specific occult meaning behind them or powers through them?
I had not learned of any powers, but you're correct that they had such spiritual significance, and sometimes that is important all its own.
And I not. Thank you for explaining.
Perhaps some, uh, perhaps this can be seen as an opportunity. Instead, you have the chance to grow your own now, instead of merely caring for that it came from another garden.
That I will give the matter a fair bit of contemplation, and as well as many other things, That seems distracted for a moment, again but again throws it off in a moment. Apologies. How about as I come back round, we just play a little game, just play a game of dice or the like. Just something simple to focus on as I collect it all.
I just had a thought. I could imagine, sort of out of character, I could imagine Labiena having like a set of knuckle bones that she's collected from corpses over the years.
Laviana, how can you use knuckle bones for dice? There aren't any numbers on them.
Yeah, Hatshepsut, one of the quick things you notice as you hear the tink 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 click 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 of her rubbing these dice together in her hand, these bones, is that Labiena has ceased several of those connections that you remember her having with her humanity. She's seems different, colder. And you could put that off to just coming back from torpor, except she's never played she's never played dice with bones, nor would she have been quite so insensitive to your predicament before.
Hat probably at least has an inkling of what happened, of what's been going on, and internally bemoans a lost opportunity. It's not the time for moping. Best for the moment, just to take the satisfaction of being amidst the world again.
Well, as you guys collect yourselves and begin to speak of the many changes, both societal and personal, I think this is a good time to end the game tonight. Everybody gets one. I have given Androdimus a XP dump to reflect his service to the Solasi. When we come back in 2 weeks, we'll be headed back to Rome to do some stuff, and we are very swiftly coming up on a large time skip. Going to be close to 100 years that we jump ahead. So, if you guys, again, I ask that you come up with anything that you think your characters would like to do, experience, change as over the years of Julius Caesar and the civil wars of Caesar and Augustus, and then the start of the Roman Empire. So, if you guys would spend some time thinking about that, I would appreciate it. Other than that, one experience for tonight. Great game.
Nice.
Yeah.
Guys, that's it. I want to thank everybody for listening, and big round of applause. Hatshepsut's back, and Androdimus is back in the background. As much as we love Androdimus, gotta love Hatshepsut more. Oh, once again, guys, thank you. Have a great evening.